Good morning, and thank you for joining us for another edition of Coffee with Tom and Joanne. I'm Joanne Taranto.
And I'm Tom Matthews. And today we're going to talk about effective home pricing strategies and what that means for a seller who's looking to sell their home. So Joanne, you want to kick us off?
Yeah, so generally there are three strategies that we discuss when listing properties, and it really depends on the experience that you want to have when you're selling your home. So if you want to have that exciting bid up, sold in one weekend, that's one pricing strategy. But if you have a more unique property, that may not be the right strategy for your home, and the market may not be telling you that that strategy is right. So there are three general strategies. One is you price it below market value, and the end goal is you are bidding the price up at the end of one weekend. Okay. The second strategy is pricing right at where you feel the market value is based on research, and then seeing if you can bid beyond that in a week or less. And then the third strategy is if you have a unique property, maybe it's equestrian, maybe it's waterfront, maybe it's new construction, and pricing for, a price elevation at a bid is maybe not the right strategy for your home. So those are the three that we do. So let's talk about the first one, like the lower, Tom, when we price properties below market value, what should the expectation be?
So the expectation for the seller is that you have to come up with a plan. And so Joanne and I have developed a really effective plan for pricing below market value. And that plan is the sign goes up on a Wednesday, showings start Thursday with a broker tour, public open house. Then you have another open house over the weekend. And your expectation as a seller is that your phone is ringing. A lot of people are coming through the property and they're coming in 1, 2, 3 times. And for that strategy, you have to have an offer deadline.
Mhm.
So typically either Monday evening, Tuesday at noontime, you have an offer deadline. And we typically like to do the Tuesday at noontime. The reason being is it gives Monday for buyers to do due diligence.
Right.
Go to the town hall, make their phone calls, have a pre-home inspection if they want. I mean, you really want to give the buyers all the opportunity because, some people have this thought, like, I'll have the bids due on Sunday night. But then buyers don't have enough time to really go through the property. And what ends up happening is you have the contract fallout.
Mhm.
And, last year in 2023, we saw fallout rates at close to 20%. So how to avoid that is by really sticking to the plan and creating this effective strategy. Probably the biggest fear sellers have is that an offer will come in right away.
Right.
And that they will feel so compelled to want to take it. And then they have fear that they leave money on the table.
I know, yeah.
So in order to really effectively do this strategy, you have to have kind of the intestinal fortitude to follow the plan and ensure that you don't leave money on the table. So
Yeah.
that's that strategy. So Joanne, how
Yeah.
about pricing the house right at the asking price or what we think it's going to sell for?
Yeah, so obviously we do research and we come up with a range of what properties are worth and what we think a willing and able buyer will pay. And so sometimes the best strategy for a home is to price right at the market value. And the hope is that the condition will carry the price higher. So what we try to do is pinpoint what we think is not only the market value, but then an effective strategic price based on the competition that's out there on the multiple listing service. And then float your home out with a similar strategy to when we list below the market value, where you list midweek, put the house immediately available for showings. But maybe in this scenario, you wait to set an offer deadline. Sometimes we need to see what the aptitude is or what the desire is for this particular property with the buyer pool that's out there. And you may wait by starting showings on Wednesday, and then I would say by Saturday, you would know whether or not setting a deadline is appropriate.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this can be a little bit confusing, but when your agent is in control of the transaction and is sending a clear, concise message that is the same to each party coming through that's asking questions. The important part for you is that you allow the strategy to work. Sometimes we end up not setting a deadline because maybe the activity is weaker than we thought it was going to be, but that perfect buyer is still there for the transaction that weekend. So we may get one offer, we may get two offers.
Right.
So I really think that this strategy is a good strategy for people who are fearful of
Right.
leaving money on the table, who want to know that they're getting a fair price for their house and not leave it up to the buyer pool to necessarily push themselves to
Right.
that point. So we recommend this strategy for certain people that, want to have a first week to first, 2 weeks sale process.
Yeah. And then the third strategy we talked about is pricing above what the market range is. And you might be sitting there being like, well, that's what people have done for the last 40 years, 50 years. It's only in the
Leave
last
room for negotiation.
Yeah, exactly. It's only in the last decade, really, that you've seen properties sell over asking price. So it could be generational. You may be an older seller. You've been in your home for 30 or 40 years. And when you bought the property, you negotiated the price down.
Mhm.
And so for you, it may just feel natural to price the house higher. And that's
Mhm.
totally fine. We also find this with unique properties. We
Mhm.
sold an Earl Flansburgh, who is a really cool architect in Boston. We sold one of his houses in Lincoln years ago, and it was one of a kind. There were four
Yeah.
other residential Earl Flansburghs. The rest were all commercial. And so we priced it a little high, and that was the strategy. And we used a tool called absorption rate.
Mhm.
You probably haven't heard this term in a long time because the market's been so hot. People haven't had to worry about absorption rate, but it basically is a calculation of how long it might take for a house to sell.
Right.
And there have been times when in our 20-year career where it can take 6 months to sell a property. And it didn't matter what you priced it at. And so you have to really understand the tools of the marketplace. And there are times when pricing a home high is acceptable.
Right.
But what you want to do is you just don't want to go too high. Typically 5% above the range is the kind of sweet spot.
Mhm.
Once you get 10, 20% above, what happens is the seller can wait too long before making a price drop.
Mhm.
And the challenge then becomes is that buyers feel, what's wrong with the house?
Right.
The house can become stigmatized.
Right.
So, with using that strategy, you want to be very, very careful. I think the first two are more effective, but that one can also yield, particularly if you have a special property.
Yeah.
So it's just, we just want to display to sellers that they have options.
Yep.
Tell them some strategies
There's
about
no one way to list a home.
nope, and just
Yep.
talk about some effective marketing strategies. And if you want more information, you can contact us to learn more about how to price your particular home.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much for watching another edition of Coffee with Tom and Joanne. I'm Tom Matthews.
And I'm Joanne Taranto.
Cheers.